The wind sliced across the ridge, whipping dust into their faces and making every movement feel heavier than it should. The sun was low, casting long shadows across the rocky terrain, and the distant rumble of artillery made the ground tremble beneath their boots. Captain Reynolds had been overseeing the forward squad for nearly an hour, scanning the horizon for any sign of enemy movement. Every soldier knew their role, and every eye was trained on the jagged line of hills that seemed to stretch endlessly. Among them, Harper felt conspicuously small, almost invisible. She was officially just the backup, the support sniper who was there in case something went wrong. The kind of presence that shouldn't draw attention, the kind that was supposed to fade into the background until called upon. She adjusted the scope on her rifle, the familiar weight of the weapon grounding her amidst the chaos around her. Her hands were steady, despite the heat, the dust, and the constant tension in the air. The squad moved in a disciplined rhythm, each member knowing when to step forward, when to retreat, and when to hold position. Harper watched them, cataloging their movements, readying herself for the moment she might be needed. She had trained for years for this kind of precision, but she had never expected to be standing on a ridge like this, in the shadow of a general she had admired from afar. Reynolds had a reputation for spotting talent, for recognizing the potential in soldiers who others might overlook. Harper, the quiet one with a calm demeanor and a sharp eye, had earned her spot here, but as backup, it was unlikely she would see action today. The ridge was a dangerous perch, overlooking a valley that could hide anything. The chatter of her teammates was minimal, clipped words exchanged over comms, and the faint hum of drones above reminded everyone that they were never truly alone. Harper's finger rested lightly on the trigger, her mind moving through calculations she didn't even think about consciously anymore: distance, wind, elevation. Her eyes scanned the far slope, tracking the slight movement of a figure disappearing behind rocks, just a flash of motion that could be dismissed, yet she noticed it. Nothing yet. Reynolds' voice crackled through the radio, calm but authoritative. His presence was commanding even over the static, a steadying force for everyone on the ridge. Harper barely responded, her focus too sharp to waste energy on casual conversation. The sun dipped lower, and the shadows stretched farther into the valley, painting everything in muted tones. Then came the sound. Just a faint click, almost drowned out by the wind. Harper froze, her pulse tightening, eyes narrowing. She had spotted the glint of a rifle barrel in the rocks below. The enemy was moving, fast and deliberate, unaware that someone was watching. Her training took over. She adjusted her aim, accounted for the slope, the wind, and the faint tremor in the distance. She exhaled slowly, every muscle tuned to precision, and then pressed the trigger. The shot cracked like a whip, echoing off the cliffs and sending birds into frantic flight. The figure below froze, then collapsed. The ridge went silent for a heartbeat, as if the world itself had paused to register what had happened. Harper lowered her rifle slightly, her heart still calm, though adrenaline surged through her veins. She had done her job, unseen, effective, lethal. From behind her, Reynolds' boots hit the rocks harder now, moving quickly toward her position. She barely had time to process the surprise that flashed across his face. The general, the man who had been overseeing the operation from the front lines, was moving toward her, not anyone else, not the squad members who were trained and armed to react. Only Harper. "You," Reynolds said, voice low, carrying both disbelief and a hint of admiration. "Did you just take that shot?" Harper nodded once, steady as ever. "Target neutralized," she replied, her voice calm, almost detached, but there was a flicker of satisfaction in her eyes. Reynolds stared at her for a moment longer than expected, the kind of look that weighed more than any command or praise. Around them, the squad adjusted, some of them glancing at her in new ways, sensing that something had shifted. Harper, the quiet backup, had become the deciding factor in a moment that could have gone very differently. The wind continued to whip across the ridge, carrying the faint scent of dust and gunpowder. Harper's eyes scanned the valley below again, methodical, vigilant. Reynolds finally nodded, the weight of acknowledgement settling in his expression. For the first time that day, Harper felt it, not just the quiet satisfaction of a job well done, but the realization that being unseen didn't mean being irrelevant. The shot had changed more than the course of the mission. It had shifted the perception of everyone on that ridge, including the general himself. The valley below had quieted, but Harper knew the calm was deceptive. From her position on the ridge, she could see subtle movements among the rocks, shadows shifting, the faint glint of weaponry catching the last rays of sun. Reynolds had repositioned closer to the edge, speaking in clipped commands over the radio, coordinating the squad's movements with precision. The enemy had regrouped after her shot, likely assuming their target had been a fluke. Harper didn't expect mistakes. The battlefield was unforgiving, and every second mattered. "Harper, cover the left flank. The ridge isn't secure yet," Reynolds' voice cut through the comms. It wasn't a suggestion. It was a directive, clear and authoritative. Harper adjusted her rifle, shifting her weight to compensate for the uneven terrain. Her heartbeat was steady, even as adrenaline sharpened her senses. She scanned for motion, tracking each figure with meticulous attention. The enemy was attempting to advance undercover, moving cautiously toward a small outcropping of rocks that could give them a tactical advantage. From her peripheral vision, she saw her squadmates move into position, their synchronized movements smooth and practiced. Every footstep, every whispered adjustment communicated silent strategy. Harper's role was simple in theory but critical in practice: neutralize threats before they could reach the ridge, protect the squad, and ensure the general's orders were executed without hesitation. But simplicity didn't make it easy. Every shot carried weight. Every decision could mean life or death. She exhaled slowly, bringing the rifle to her shoulder. The wind had shifted slightly, carrying a hint of dust that blurred the line of sight. Her finger hovered above the trigger, ready. A figure emerged briefly from behind a boulder, a glint of metal, a fleeting movement, and Harper fired. The target went down instantly, collapsing into the shadowy terrain. She adjusted, scanning for another movement, another potential threat. "Good shot," Reynolds said over the comms, but this time there was a subtle edge of something more: approval, recognition, a hint that he was taking note. Harper didn't look to see his reaction. She didn't need confirmation. The results spoke for themselves. Suddenly, a volley of rifle fire erupted from the valley, sharp and sudden, forcing the squad to duck behind cover. The enemy had regrouped faster than anticipated, and their assault was coordinated, aggressive. Harper moved with them, sliding to a new vantage point, assessing the line of fire. Her eyes caught a sniper positioned far across the valley, attempting to flank them. She didn't hesitate. She accounted for distance, elevation, and the sway of the ridge under her boots. The shot was clean, precise, and effective. The squad advanced as Reynolds directed, clearing each segment of the ridge systematically. Harper covered them, neutralizing threats that appeared in her line of sight with calm, methodical efficiency. She was no longer just backup. She was the pivot around which the operation turned. Every successful shot reinforced her presence, changing the dynamic of the team without a word. Reynolds moved beside her when the immediate danger passed, his expression unreadable, yet focused on her. "You've got nerves of steel," he said quietly, almost to himself. Not many can stay this calm under pressure. Harper only nodded, keeping her focus forward, but she felt the subtle shift. The acknowledgement that she was more than a silent observer, that her skills mattered in ways that even the general could no longer ignore. The sun had dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows that merged with the rising darkness. The valley was quiet again, but Harper stayed vigilant, scanning for movement, her senses alert. The squad regrouped, checking weapons and assessing the battlefield. Reynolds finally addressed the entire team, his voice carrying authority and pride. "We held the ridge because of precision and teamwork. Everyone did their part, but some contributions were decisive." His eyes lingered on Harper just long enough to let her know that he meant more than the words themselves. The night would be long, and the ridge remained vulnerable, but Harper felt a quiet satisfaction, a recognition that had nothing to do with praise or orders. She had proven herself in a moment where her presence was underestimated, where her skills had made a tangible difference. And as Reynolds looked at her from across the rocky terrain, she sensed that the general's perception had begun to change. Quietly, subtly, but unmistakably. The ridge was quiet now, but the tension lingered in the air like a thick fog. The night had fully settled, and the stars were barely visible through the haze of dust and smoke. Harper crouched behind a jagged rock, rifle still in hand, her eyes scanning the valley below even though the immediate threat had passed. Every shadow, every flicker of movement could be the next danger. Yet, in the quiet after the firefight, she allowed herself a brief moment to exhale. The operation had been more than a test. It had been a proving ground, and she had held her ground when it mattered most. Reynolds approached, his boots crunching softly on the rocky surface. He had been assessing the perimeter, but now he stopped beside her, his expression a mixture of exhaustion, respect, and something harder to define, an acknowledgement that went deeper than words. The squad had gathered a short distance away, tending to minor injuries, checking weapons, and quietly recounting the sequence of events. Harper stayed low, methodical, her eyes still sweeping the valley, but she felt the weight of attention shift toward her. "You did well today," Reynolds said, voice low, but carrying over the faint wind. "Not many can stay that composed under pressure, not many can make the difference like you did. That shot, it changed everything." Harper met his gaze, calm and measured, but inside, a small spark of pride flared. It wasn't about recognition, it was about the moment itself, the proof that her preparation, patience, and skill could alter outcomes when stakes were highest. He stepped closer, lowering his voice further so only she could hear. "I've watched a lot of soldiers. Some talk a big game, others are all action and little precision. You're both, and more. You're exactly the kind of person I need on the front lines, the kind who doesn't wait for orders when action is necessary." Harper nodded, her mind processing the words without the need for immediate reply. She had expected acknowledgement, but not like this, not the subtle weight of respect from a man whose opinion had shaped so many careers before hers. The squad began moving down the ridge, securing the path for extraction. Harper remained for a moment, checking one last vantage point before following. Reynolds stayed behind slightly, as if ensuring she was truly ready, truly in command of her own movements. The way he looked at her was different now, not the general observing a backup, but the strategist recognizing an indispensable force in the field. As they descended, Harper noticed the subtle glances from her teammates. Respect had grown quietly throughout the mission, unspoken yet undeniable. They had seen her precision, her calm under fire, and the decisive action that had kept them alive. And perhaps more importantly, they had seen the general himself look at her differently. It was a shift that couldn't be ignored. When they finally reached the base camp, the hum of generators and faint chatter greeted them. Harper set her rifle down, wiping dust and sweat from her hands, and allowed herself to relax. Reynolds approached her once more, this time in front of the squad, his voice carrying authority and acknowledgement. "Today, we faced a difficult engagement, and each of you played a role in holding the ridge. But one soldier's actions were decisive, precise, and quietly brilliant. Harper, step forward." Harper moved, steady and composed, toward the front. The squad watched, silent and attentive, and Reynolds nodded toward her with genuine respect. "You were meant to be backup, but you became the reason we held our position. That is the mark of skill, courage, and professionalism. Well done." There was no fanfare, no over-the-top praise, just quiet acknowledgement that carried far more weight than any loud declaration ever could. Harper allowed herself a small smile, a flicker of satisfaction that this moment wasn't about glory, but about earned respect. Reynolds extended a hand, and she shook it firmly, understanding the significance of the gesture. Around them, the squad adjusted, resumed their duties, but Harper knew the perception of her role had shifted irreversibly. She was no longer just a backup on the ridge. She had proven herself in the crucible of action. As the camera angle shifted for the briefing debrief, Reynolds glanced at her and added, with a slight grin, "And for anyone watching this story, remember, the quiet ones, the ones who wait and observe, are sometimes the ones who make the biggest difference. Don't miss out on more stories like this." Harper caught the subtle nod to the audience, and Reynolds continued, "Subscribe to our channel, Her Stories Words, for more accounts of courage, precision, and the moments that change everything." Harper turned her gaze to the horizon, the ridge now behind her, and felt a quiet sense of closure and readiness. The night was calm, but the impact of her actions would echo far beyond the ridge itself.